Yeah.
30 minutes to one. Thanks for joining us on Facebook and YouTube as well with Dr. Alex Allinson. A question in, Dr. Allinson. How long does it take to get a result once you get tested?
It should be that day or the following day. What we've got on the Isle of Man, obviously now as opposed to back in March, is on island testing. But the PCR takes around about up to 2 or 24 hours to get the results back. But most people, depending on what time they've had the test, will get the results back in 24 hours.
Does it hurt having a test?
I've never had the nasal swab. My father did, and it said it really made his eyes water.
Because it's right up into the sinuses, isn't it?
What you want to do is get it to the back of the throat. Now, if you do that through the mouth, you just make somebody gag, and all you get is saliva. So the nasal swabs are very long, and they go right to the back of the throat because that's where the virus multiplies. That's where it latches on to various receptors.
What is long COVID?
That's a very good question. It's ongoing symptoms related to a COVID infection. And we now think it isn't just one syndrome. It can be a series of syndromes. We know that some people, after, for instance, glandular fever, get post-viral fatigue. They can go on produce sort of chronic fatigue syndrome. And we know that people with COVID can get that. We also know that people, after being intubated and ventilated, can have a range of conditions, including post-traumatic stress, because of the psychological effects it has on them. But also with coronavirus, because it affects various different tissues in the body, including the heart, the lungs, the blood vessels, and the brain, can cause a range of long-term conditions in terms of heart problems, breathing problems, but also psychological and psychiatric problems. And what we're doing at the moment in terms of the medical profession is getting some better information about that. But again, everyone's different. You get some people who have had a relatively mild case of coronavirus that they've looked after at home having long-term problems. Other people have been ventilated who walk out and they're absolutely fine. So it's very variable.
So what causes the variation? Is it the state of someone's immune system, their general metabolism? What is it?
We're still not quite sure, to be honest with you. There's a big debate about the way it affects different ethnic groups in a different way. We know that some people are more prone to severe effects, particularly if they're overweight. We know that people who've got pre-existing conditions are more at risk. There may well be other genetic factors involved, and also susceptibilities that people have had in the past where it rekindles underlying illness.
What damage does long COVID do to the heart?
It can cause various problems both with the heart vessels in terms of a vasculitis, but also the heart muscle itself can get weaker so that you get heart failure and all the symptoms that causes. So for instance, swelling of the ankles, shortness of breath, and eventually angina and chest pain due to the excess load that's being put on the heart. And again, this can affect relatively young, otherwise fit and healthy people in ways that we still don't quite understand.
Rachel, a concerned mother of 2 university students, the Minister previously mentioned that he's planning to aid students and families in financial difficulties with return and accommodation while quarantining on the island. Any more information?
Yeah, what we're doing is obviously monitoring the situation in the UK with universities perhaps closing a little bit early so people can come back. We have said people will need to quarantine for 14 days when they come back, and we're looking into a range of ways that we can support them. Various people who are on maintenance grants, for instance, if they're running into financial problems, then please get in contact with the department. There are various funds we can access there, but we're also looking into other ways that we can help students come back and be safe, both for them, their families, and their community.
A question in now regarding cannabis and cannabis cultivation on the Isle of Man. You've previously been very candid and forthright about this. Back
in the day when I was studying for election, it was something that as a doctor, I felt very strongly about, that we needed to open up access to medicinal cannabis on the island. What we've seen in the United Kingdom is you can now prescribe it, but actually nobody is. There's a lack of supply of cannabis products. The ones that are being supplied often are imported from Holland, and there's a lack of knowledge in terms of doctors and confidence in them prescribing it. So what we need to do on the Isle of Man is create that source and then educate doctors, educate pharmacists to be able to get people who would benefit from medicinal cannabis access to it.
What's the difference? Is it THC and CBD?
Yep.
What's the difference?
CBD is the the oil, I suppose, if you want to call it. It's available. It's not illegal. You can use it. It has various medicinal properties that we know of. It's used in Epidiolex in terms of childhood epilepsy. It can be extremely good in terms of an anti-inflammatory, but for a lot of people, adding a small amount of THC, which gives you the high, if you want, adds that benefit. We still do not quite understand how the endogenous endocannabinoid system works in human bodies. There's lots of receptors all over the brain and other organs. And what many people find through clinical trials is that they need a subtle combination of CBD and THC to actually get the full benefits. But under existing legislation, anything with a significant or even a very small amount of THC is classed as illegal. And we need to get round that legality issue to actually provide people with a safe, effective product that they know exactly what the contents are, and we can then do some really interesting observational studies to take this further.
A question in from Andy, and this regards the independent schools on the Isle of Man, KWC and Buchan. Is the government helping KWC and Buchan ensure their long-term viability? Without these schools, fewer people will move to the island, and state schools would need to be able to take an extra 200-300 students. Is there any long-term support or money, really, for the Buchan and KWC to ensure their facilities are maintained to an acceptable and competitive manner?
We haven't been asked to provide financial support for King William's College, but actually I've met with the principal there. I have made it quite clear that they are part of our education service. They are one of our schools on the Isle of Man. They happen to be private, they happen to charge fees, but they also give out a lot of bursaries and scholarships to Isle of Man students. And I think your caller is quite right that they are part of a package, that we do get people moving to the Isle of Man who want the choice to give their children a private education, and a very different education, because of course they provide the International Baccalaureate, which can be very helpful for those people who may be here just for a couple of years and then going over to another jurisdiction. So I'm quite happy to meet with the trustees of King William's College. I've been invited to their carol service. I'll be there. They are one of our schools.
OK, we had loads about the flumes, which I apologise if I didn't get to your comment. Just very briefly, a final one, Dr. Allinson. The NSC significantly out of date with facilities for people with disabilities. The NSC plans for improvement 3 years ago included disabled improvements, but the majority of these haven't taken place. Any plans?
Absolutely. I mean, we now have an Equality Act, and I'm absolutely committed to making sure we have accessibility for all the facilities at the NSC. Part of the swimming pool hall redevelopment was looking at the changing areas, was looking at the shower areas, was making that far more accessible. And I hope that once all that has been opened, we can then get feedback from those people with disabilities who use the facilities to make it even better.
OK, and finally, there's always a question in that says, ask Dr. Allinson, is he standing in the Keys general election next year?
Yes. Yes, I mean, I hesitate because I think this year has been bruising for all of us, and I've been sitting down with my family, and they've seen me go grey and a few more wrinkles on my face. It's been difficult for all of our community, but there's still so much that needs to be done on this island, and if I can be a part of that, I'd be honoured.
Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
Always appreciate your attendance, Dr. Alex Allinson. MHK for Ramsey, one of the MHKs for Ramsey. If you have anything to add, by the way, you can always email maninline@manxradio.com or call the answer phone on 682-631. We're out and about at the schools between now and Christmas, and members of Comin will be on the Man in Line as well. And if you have anything to follow up, by all means, do get in touch. We don't read every comment out. We can't read every comment out because there are so many. But everything you send in does get read, and we do listen to all the messages. Thanks to our producer today, Barry Redfern, for Ben Hartley on the video duty, and I'll be back tomorrow at midday.